Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Istituto Affari Internazionali. It's really a great pleasure to host today this trilateral dialogue between Israeli Palestinians and you, an audience of Europeans, Italians. And I must say that this is something particularly important, this event, because I think there are really rare occasions in which we can we can host people who actually are like living on their skin this conflict, but who with enormous personal and human work decided that to choose the road for peace and coexistence. This event today follows another event that took place yesterday in closed doors, where 6 participants from Israel and Palestine decided to agreed to come here to Rome as a part of a project that my colleague Daniel with Candid runs across Europe, and to speak to an Italian audience of a small group of journalists and people from the field of culture, to give really a strong message that okay, this conflict is very difficult, it's very complicated, but there are also people who are living in this conflict who still believe in coexistence. I think that today, in this hour and a half, we will not be able to somehow resolve the geopolitics of the conflict. We have actually, I think, in Italy, from the radio, the TV, even spoke too much of the geopolitics of the conflict and too little of the humans who are actually part of this conflict and what they're living through. So I do think that it's particularly precious and important to start from these micro steps, this individual decision, people who actually decide to meet, to coexist, and say this to a European audience, because let's also remind ourselves that this conflict, has also divided us among our own societies. And to say that I want to just read a short passage of one of my favorite authors, Primo Levi, who really speaks very clearly about, as an Holocaust survivor, about the cycle of violence and the cycle of trauma and what it can unleash. And in The Truth, he has a very beautiful passage of when basically the camp is liberated, but this is not really a liberation. And he says, no one could ever grasp better than us the incurable nature of the offense, which spreads like an infection. It breaks the body and soul of those who are drowned, extinguishes them, and makes them abject, rises again as infamy in the oppressors, is perpetuated as hatred in the survivors, and springs up in 1,000 ways against the very will of all, as a thirst for revenge, as a moral breakdown, as a negation, as a weariness, as a resignation. We have today 2 people and others in the room who have broke that cycle of revenge, I think, and this is a beautiful opportunity to listen to them. Over to you, Daniel.
Thank you, Maria. Primariamente vorrei ringraziare i nostri amici dell'Istituto Affari Internazionali per averci ospitato qui, in particolare Akram, Samui e Maria Fantapie. E anche voglio estendere la mia gratitudine ai nostri amici, nostri esperti di Israele e Palestina che hanno viaggiato qui in condizioni difficili, per dire il meno. Grazie mille. My name is Daniel Gerlach. I'm the Director General of Candid Foundation, and I am really honored to be here. We know that the King of the United Kingdom is in town, and you have nothing better to do than come to us and listen to our discussion. And I'm really, really grateful for that. Well, we walked here. I don't know how you did. Yes, thank you very much for being here. I would like to very briefly introduce our 2 speakers and then jump into the discussion, because as I can imagine all of you are very well familiar with the Israeli-Palestinian issue, though we might have different opinions about this, but I think we share some common analysis, so we don't have to repeat the details of what's happening geopolitically and what's happening on the ground. However, I would like to start with Jomana Janoui, who is from Jerusalem, who's a political scientist. She reiterates that she's not a peace activist. She is an analyst of the situation on the ground. She has been...
Sorry, انتي already في الكاب؟ أنا بحضر زوم بس it's okay.
Maybe whoever is calling in, we appreciate very much. And I forgot to mention that.
نزلتها داونلودت وعايزاك
Our guest.
لا فايل بس تحطيه في البتاع وانا حاجه.
Sorry for this.
No worries, no worries.
انتي مشغله الكاميرا؟ لا.
This is a very gentle reminder that we also have people participating online who I would like to welcome to this conversation. Thank you very much for the reminder. And also remind you that this is a public event, so we are on the record. This is not a Chatham House rule event, so whatever we say and whatever you ask or comment on this might be recorded or spread out there, which is also a good opportunity because closed-door events are useful, but sometimes it's also important to speak about certain sensitive topics in public. Jomana, can you tell us, first of all, what's, in your view, happening on the ground at the moment and what we might be missing while we are studying the war in Gaza, the visit of Prime Minister Netanyahu to the White House, and all the political and geopolitical negotiations? Could you tell us what you think we are probably not aware of and what is going on, in particular the part that you are looking at, which is Jerusalem and the West Bank? Give us a very, very brief introduction on that.
Good morning. Thank you, and thanks everyone for being here. Yes, I came all the way from Jerusalem with a hope that the Palestinian voice can be heard. Because, as you mentioned, there's lots happening, and there's so much in the media and in the public awareness. But from a Palestinian perspective, there are issues that perhaps here in Europe are not very clear to from the outside. So the Palestinians today are facing one of the most critical periods in their history. Since 1948. And this is mainly because of the disintegration on several levels, which I'll try to be short in explaining. We have the situation in Gaza, where we're moving to the unknown, where 2 million Palestinians do not know what will happen to them. Those who left Gaza don't know if they can return. Those who are still in Gaza are besieged, hungry, lost their homes, lost their family members, and living in a vacuum of international law, in a way. Then we have Palestinians in the West Bank who currently live in under movement restrictions that makes movement from one place to the other very much difficult. We have an increasing Israeli settlement construction and takeover of land, confining Palestinians to certain areas. The economic situation in the West Bank is unbelievably bad for the people. There is much friction between the Palestinians who are confined in a number of cities and towns and the Israeli army and the Israeli settlers. We have a system of highways for the settlers that the Palestinians cannot use. We have checkpoints, gates at the entrances of every town and city. And in all this, there is no Palestinian leadership that is capable of telling the people where are we going. In Gaza, Hamas still is the authority there on the Palestinian side, and in the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority has been constrained by a number of external and internal factors. External factors, of course, include the donor support that is becoming very low. The Israeli restrictions, first financially, PA VAT revenues are withheld in Israel and they constitute a major part of the PA budget. So the PA has not been able to pay its civil servants for the last 2 years and paying just percentages of that. No money to spend on development, so just spending daily. And also in terms of a political plan on where we're going, there seems to be high unclarity on the Palestinian side. Of course, we have a PA which says that it's still committed to the Oslo process and the peace process, but at the same time, we do not see any progress in that field. There has been several attempts of reconciliation of Palestinian leaderships, Hamas, Fatah, and all the other factions, but they have been a failure. The Palestinians have also, in the past year or so, found themselves isolated in the sense that we do not see much international support and don't know if the Palestinians are still important on the international scene with many other challenges and conflicts all over. Jerusalem, which is supposed, I mean, with the Oslo process, there have been issues that have been agreed between the Palestinians and the Israelis, and we see violations on these issues, such as Palestinian control of the population. But there were several issues that were postponed, hoping that at a later stage we'll come to a final agreement, such as water, refugees, Jerusalem, and Area C, where Israel is constructing settlements. All these issues have been challenged lately. On the issue of refugees, we saw Israeli operations in Jenin, Tulkarem, and the North-West Bank refugee camps, where people were displaced because Israel wants to change the structure of the refugee camps, building new roads and having more military access to the area. There are fears that these operations will spread to other refugee camps. There is the whole UNRWA issue, and therefore the issue of refugees is becoming another question mark. In Jerusalem, since the US recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, there has been intensive Israeli takeover of East Jerusalem. And this is not only changing the demographics, it's also preventing any Palestinian activity in the city. And the restrictions on freedom extend from restrictions on freedom of movement, restrictions on travel, on freedom of expression, and freedom of worship in Jerusalem. We had Ramadan for Muslims last month, and we saw some restrictions on the entry of Muslims to the holy sites in Jerusalem. Next week we have Easter, and we also have restrictions on Christians in East Jerusalem. The issue of Jerusalem is also one of the issues that's very much neglected, but it's the glue that binds Palestinians together. I will stop here, and if there are any questions to elaborate on details, happy to do so.
Thank you, Jumana, for setting the scene. To my left is Liel Magen, who is a Middle East expert and an expert in peace building and conflict resolution. And he has a very personal biographical attachment to this city. I mean, all mankind does in a way. But for Liel, I think being here in Rome is something very personal. He will tell you why. But first of all, I would like to ask you, Liel, give us an idea about what's going on in the Israeli society at the moment. We are in, I think now, 18 months of military operation, of war in Gaza. Does Israeli society still care about what's going on? Do people follow the news? Do they support the government policy? What is your impression at the moment?
Thank you, Daniel. Buongiorno a tutti. Volevo iniziare in italiano perché le mie radici sono italiane. Mia madre è proprio di qua, è nata a Roma Nord, e i miei nonni sono del ghetto. Sì, tutto tutta la mia infanzia siamo venuti qua spesso per le feste ebree e l'abbiamo sempre fatti al sinagoga grande. Allora scusatemi se parlo in inglese alla fine. On these issues, unfortunately, I don't have this level of Italian, and also when it becomes more emotional, it's more difficult for me. So I hope you understand it. I ended with saying that I used to go regularly to the synagogue as I was a kid, but I also remember there was a lot of police around it. And when I asked why, they told me there was a shooting in the synagogue in 81. 82. And the shooting was in the same year that my parents decided to get married, and the shooting was one of the reasons to move to Israel. Actually, my father is a refugee from Libya. He was expelled from Libya, he's a Tripolino, expelled from Libya in '67 because of another solidarity movement pro-Palestinian that eventually hit the Jewish neighborhood of the city, and eventually the Jewish people were evacuated. So I had a history which is very strong education around Zionism as the only place for the Jewish people to feel safe. And also with the stories here of my nonni, of my grandfather and grandmother, I heard about how fascism can manipulate your neighbors, how fascism can create hatred, how the place where they grew up and were living for generations suddenly became unsafe, how my grandmother was hidden in monasteries around Rome, and how my grandfather did not want to convert to Christianity or to hide his Judaism, so he ran away all the way south, and then in the south he joined the British Army and was one of those to fight to liberate Rome. This brought like a very strong nationalism sense in my upbringing in Israel, but with some kind of globalist perspective around it. My grandparents decided to stay here in Rome, and whenever I asked them why you are not moving to Israel, they told me, siamo italiani, siamo di qua. And sometimes I didn't understand this tension, between being nationalistic, wanting Israel to exist, but also knowing that you are from here, and knowing that your roots are here and you want to belong here, and in some way creating safety here. A part of my family also became activist here in Rome. My uncle is Davide Megnaggi, Professor Davide Megnaggi, which was also around the political activism here in the city, whether Jewish activism, but also creating a political spectrum that is safe. I'm saying all of this because eventually in Israel, in my army service, I got into a junction where my morals were conflicted. And eventually in the army service, I lost friends, but also saw that there is a political reason behind all of it, that it's beyond safety and beyond security. There is a reason for grabbing land, there is a reason for oppression, there is a reason for not accepting Palestinians as equal to us. And for me, it didn't make sense. And luckily, a friend that he was here until this morning and he left, Suleiman Khatib, they opened an organization of combatants for peace that is focusing on bringing ex-combatants to speak with each other. And there, for the first time, I spoke with a Palestinian. I was 22 years of age, and my mind completely shifted. I felt that I suddenly see the country in a way that I didn't see before. I hear names and stories of places that I was afraid of visiting. The Palestinians showed me around the country. They took me to East Jerusalem that I saw as a place that is dangerous for me. They taught me histories that were completely hidden from me, and eventually also taught me Arabic that allowed me to understand what my father is telling to his brothers around dinners. And for me, it was a very healing process, but also a painful one, because seeing what your country is doing can be very, very painful. And sometimes I dedicated myself to educate Israelis to understand what's going on. And sometimes I was attacked because I tried to show them that. It was very painful to recognize. People prefer to deny. People prefer to completely ignore it. Actually, people were doing it here and in Germany and in Austria throughout the Second World War. Denial is an easier way than actually recognizing the atrocities that your people are doing. something very, very difficult to do. Eventually, we hit a wall. As in the peace-building movement, we felt that there is no way of convincing the Israeli society in some way. And I can tell you, I answer your question now. I can tell you that from seeing that our numbers were limited for many years, somehow in the last couple of years, I see more numbers than ever before. There were studies showing that the peace-building movement is actually expanding and more people joining these organizations. There are more resources that are going into those directions and more people that join the demonstrations. I'm actually supposed to be speaking in a big people's conference in Jerusalem in the beginning of May. There was also one last year. The organization did not exist before, but also there is a growing sentiment of criticism of the government in ways that were not legitimate before, whether completely questioning the service in the army at the moment, whether understanding that there is a political reason behind the last attack on Gaza, whether by seeing the government is completely corrupted and not taking care of the people. And I feel there is a potential there. And we can see in all the polls over the last year that the current coalition did not get any majority. Actually, 2/3 is the opposite side of the opposition. And the opposition wants to end the war and wants to release the hostages. And I truly hope that it will be the same coalition as the last time, which brought also an Arab party in and then created kind of a stability or sustainable framework towards a shared future that I hope also will end the occupation and will create freedom and safety and dignity for all.
Jumana, do you share Liel's optimism with regard to the outlook of the political landscape that the opposition, or like the united opposition against the current government, would be able to deal with the situation and to eventually end the war? While I'm talking, you can.
Well, first, the mere presence of Liel and other Israelis in this forum has been encouraging. Because honestly, since the war started, the divide has been shocking on both sides and on a general sphere. Because for the last 2 years, we saw that in Israel there has been a movement for the freedom of hostages, which I personally support fully. But we didn't see much mention of what was happening in Gaza, and that was a bit distressing, because if you carry humanitarian values, you have to care for all. And there was little focus on what was happening inside Gaza on the Israeli side. And also on the Palestinian side, there was little action on the issue of hostages. But usually, like, when I see people who continue to believe in universal values and not supporting X because he's X or supporting Y because he's Y, like either pro-Palestinian or pro-Israeli, it's not that, it's not the issue. The issue is pro-values. What are the values that we carry? So I am encouraged. But sorry, I have to mention something, because now I just got on WhatsApp a message from my daughter, who studies at Al-Quds University, that the Israeli army is surrounding the university, and she's pretty scared. And that just reminds me of the day-to-day challenges that Palestinians under occupation are facing. But so we have these two sentiments, but it's very encouraging, really.
Yeah, just to add to it, on top of what I said, there is a growing number of people that actually refuse today to go to Gaza. And the army is almost like splitting regarding those that are actually continuing to be part of these atrocities and those who are not. And the army is becoming more as a political force. And unfortunately, they take now actions that seemed outrageous or not legitimate at all a few years ago. And I don't know what happened today in Al-Quds University. I know that also 20 years ago, around the second Intifada, they used to do these actions. But I truly hope that somehow this will end soon because of this growing questioning or refusal. And yeah, I really feel that eventually Israeli society will need to face and to see what is happening right now and it's happening for many decades. It will be very painful, but it's a reality that it won't be able to ignore or deny anymore. The question is how and what will make us get there faster than later.
Both of you are representatives of the civil society. So none of you are political decision makers. You are not engaged in a political party or any opposition movement. Now, my personal experience from many years of working in this field is like politicians usually tend to say, it's great to have civil society, it's really great, civil society is the future. But when you ask them like, why is that so? And how would civil society have any leverage over the political decision making? I mean, there's peace activists, we're talking about the growing peace camp. Our experience is that there's much more that if you look into the details that Israelis and Palestinians can agree upon, then meets the eye. But what leverage, and that's a question to both of you, does civil society in this very critical situation have? Or is it probably the only force that has leverage over the political decision making? And please, if you disagree with each other, feel free to.
The word civil society maybe like sounds very abstract, but when we talk civil society, we're actually talking people. That's the thing.
And let's say society, not civil society. I'm not talking about NGOs alone, society.
Yeah, so when we talk about the people, they need to be the drive for everything, especially when either as Palestinians lack leadership or as Israelis have a complicated leadership. It is the role of the people, because at the end of the day, we're human and we know what's best for us. From that simple comment, I just want to say that as a Palestinian, we have been under direct military occupation for 27 years, from 1967 to 93. Then in 93, we had the Palestinian Authority, so it was indirect Israeli occupation, while given an authority based on a peace agreement signed between the government of Israel and the PLO to govern the population. Then in 2007, there was this, 2006, sorry, there was the split with Hamas and the PA and the two views, and the Palestinian people have been more of an observer to what was happening. And even though, like in the first decades, the Palestinians, before the creation of the PA, the Palestinian society was a leader in bringing change, in making change. They led the first uprising that was a more peaceful uprising against the occupation. This engagement created change. But now we see that we are in a state of affairs that is very critical, but yet we don't see any real work for change. And this is because of the absence of society in the whole equation, because in the past few decades, things were left to the leaders to decide, whether it's in Gaza or in the West Bank. There was no community participation in political decision-making. And that's why one of the reasons that we are in this situation today. A few weeks ago, I was talking to people from Gaza who were leading civil society figures, as you would call them, and we were talking about the Arab plan and the Palestinian plan and Trump's deal and all these proposals on the table. And one point they said that this time we will not leave it for them to decide our future. We need to be more engaged. And when there is after the war, there is a kind of reconstruction effort or whatever, we need to lead, and we will not leave our destiny in the hands of these two.
But I want to probe you on that again. For many Palestinians, after the assault of Hamas on Israel, after 50,000 people dead in Gaza, many Palestinians believe that dialogue or engagement with Israel is not only useless, but might also be seen as treason. So how do you see the chances for, because if I understand you correctly, this can only work, like the agency that the society can get over the political decision-making process can only happen if it's somehow reciprocated, if it's also supported on the Israeli side. It can only happen if there's also coordination, let's say, with Israeli society. Or do you think the Palestinian society can take this into its own hands without the support of the Israeli society? And if, like, is it possible to have dialogue on a grassroots level apart from a few, let's say, enlightened and, you know, peace-liking individuals that are gathering in our circles?
Sorry, it can be parallel and it can be one after the other. I think both sides, sorry, and I can speak only for Palestinians, we have homework to do. We have a lot of internal homework to do today. Because we are in a very dangerous period, like I mentioned before, the whole Palestinian cause and the whole Palestinian question is being challenged. So we have lots of internal homework to do. So maybe at the first stage, I think it would be internal Palestinian effort, regardless of the dialogue with Israel. But on the issue that you mentioned, one of the challenges recently with the war and the relation between Palestinians inside the occupied territories and Palestinians in the diaspora has been the question of boycott and the question of normalization. We have a strong Palestinian campaign that calls for anti-normalization and considers any dialogue with the Israelis as normalizing the occupation and normalizing the war. And we have this, it's a strong campaign, I'm not denying this. But personally, I believe, for example, if we take the United States, and then when we had several demonstrations in the United States in support of Gaza, it was the Jewish voice in the US that really had impact and that really made change. And it's the collaboration between the two that can actually make things happen. So on the issue of normalization and boycott, also I think it's not black and white. It could be like the Palestinians could be more like could boycott certain companies that support the occupation, can be specific, but on the contact between Palestinians and Israelis, I strongly believe that it does more harm to cut the contact than to establish it. And since 2000, with the Israeli construction of the barrier between the West Bank and Israel, and with all the checkpoints and divisions, etc., Palestinians and Israelis did not know each other as human. Like, we did not have contacts. Like, I live in a place where, like, if I cross the street in Jerusalem, like 5 meters, there's an Israeli living. But we have absolutely no contact. We use different roads, we go to different shops, even though we're very close to each other. We made what is not normal normal. So that's the thing. We are here because for the last 20 years, we do not know each other. We don't have contact. The only contact between a Palestinian and Israeli is perhaps the soldier at the checkpoint. So I think the more contact we have, the more we see each other as human. And also in Israel, there's a major dehumanizing of the Palestinians. They don't see us as humans sometimes, and that is one of the dangers that exist.
Liel, how is it on the Israeli side? How acceptable are you and your efforts to open dialogue with Palestinians in your own society?
Thank you, Daniel. For your first question regarding the civil society, it's been years that I'm doing a research of what was done in other areas of conflict in the world that became more stable or almost solved. And everywhere I see that the civil society was crucial, whether in creating the ecosystem before the agreement or whether in implementing the agreement itself. In Northern Ireland, there was a whole foundation, IFI, International Fund for Ireland, established by the US and European Union and the UK, fully focused on creating the ecosystem necessary for an agreement to be adopted. This happened a decade before the agreement. And the Alliance for Middle East Peace, I think, did the research of showing how much that fund was extremely higher than the funds that are going into peace building in Israel-Palestine. If I remember well, around 7 times more per person. Besides that, if I move to South Africa, civil society was extremely necessary to put the international pressure towards the apartheid regime, but also within South Africa after the reform happened to bring people together. Bosnia, Kosovo as well. Whether it was an international agreement that imposed on the people, civil society was there eventually to bring the people together and to implement that. I actually spoke with people from Bosnia in the last weeks, asking about the civil society organizations in the time of displaced people coming back, which was a whole period of around 9 years, until 2007. So civil society is crucial. And this is why the government, the Israeli government, is trying to limiting it, try to put more regulations on funding, and try to ostracize them or to show them as traitors. Even now in Israel, the important movie of No Other Land, that if you didn't watch, you should definitely watch it. For me, it's an amazing movie about the struggle of South Hebron Hills, of the Palestinian communities, but also about solidarity, about how Israelis choose to be together with those that suffer and support them and raise their voice. And this movie today is boycotted in Israel completely. Institutions are not able to show it. Cinemas are not able to screen it. And
you say institutions are not showing it, but do you think that Israelis would go watch it if it was available in the theaters?
Actually, some organizations screen it, and it's all the time full. Even though people can watch it in the internet for free, they still want to make the statement of going and watching it in public. So Israelis, I feel, are very interested in this, and this is why the government is trying to limit them. And I think we are entering in an era that the government will do more and more regulations on these organizations because they are becoming bigger. Standing Together is in the biggest moment that it had for a long, long time. The question is how you create a civil society that is healthy. And I agree with Jumana here, that many think that peace is only dialogue. Let's bring Israelis and Palestinians to speak with each other, and then they will become friends, or then the hate level will be reduced. And as I shared with you in the beginning, this is what transformed me. The fact that Palestinians were able or were willing to come and speak with me is what transformed me politically. Is what allowed me to feel safe and to feel that I have partners with the other side. So I don't want to undermine that completely. That is very important for the first step. But all of these organizations need to create projects on the ground to show what solidarity is. And many organizations actually are doing this move in the last years. When I spoke in one of my research with civil society peace-building organizations, many of them told me that they transfer the funds for humanitarian aid to support Gazans, or to support together on different levels people that try to run away from Gaza, or to support a family of a member of the organization, that one of them is sitting with us today. It is an amazing, inspiring, peace-building leader that lost 31 members of his family in Gaza, and he's still sitting with us today. And I thank you for it and admire you for it. Thabet Abouras.
I'm sure Thabet will have a word to say when we open the discussion. I want to bring in here another player. I mean, there's a reason why we are in Rome. No, not only because it's a beautiful city or because you have family here, but we are in the heart of Europe. Now it's been a national sport for Europeans and non-Europeans for many years to say that Europe's role in the Middle East and the Israeli-Palestinian theater is completely useless, is completely inefficient because of its lack of unity, and that the only player that can influence the situation is probably in the White House, maybe in the Gulf, in the Arab world, but certainly not in Europe. My first question, and then I would also open up the discussion to our plenary, is do you agree with that assessment? And why, if yes or no, is that so?
I actually think that in today's geopolitics of the world is really crucial for the EU to take a stronger role in regarding the politics of the region and bringing into stability. It's the neighborhood of the European Union. The European Union depends on it, and it impacts the local societies with polarization regarding pro this camp or the other. And besides that, Europe has an amazing experience in doing that, again, in Kosovo and Bosnia. Being the supervision in the border, enabling equipment and material to enter, in Kosovo specifically, even though there were no negotiations or there was no agreement signed. Or in Bosnia, making sure that there is an envelope around Bosnia in regarding economic transition, in regarding investment, in regarding ability of people to have jobs when they go back to broken areas. Europe also, in the Middle East, played an important role. The biggest project that I've done in Jerusalem were funded by the European Union. I can tell you that I managed to impact thousands of people in Jerusalem with one of the projects, offering employment in green transition in a center for women that we opened in East Jerusalem, but also creating solidarity across the city between religious people, right-wing people, Palestinian people, with the idea of a city identity, that we all should be equal in the same city. This was completely funded by the European Union. And unfortunately, with time, the resources were reduced in this kind of work. But I feel with the current geopolitics, I see a rising interest. And within this interest, I want to also offer an inspiration, a vision. Europe offers a vision for the region, a vision of a regional integration after a war, of opening the borders, of creating new agreements, of putting the war aside and becoming integrated and interdependent in order for the future generations to live safely. This is the message that I see whenever I come to Europe. This is the message that many refugees from the Middle East are hoping for when they come to Europe. And I feel it's something that Europe can bring as a message to the region instead of just trying to deal with the immigrants in other ways.
I find the Europe's role is very essential and very critical, especially now, actually. There is much that Europe can do, both as EU and as individual European states. Europe had the Second World War experience, and after the Second World War experience, the effort to have an international law that governs wars and governs conflicts. And today, Europe has a role to play on this, on asserting that international law does matter and that there are rules of the game. And this international system should not collapse. So that's one. The second thing, one of the issues that the Palestinians had difficulty with over the past 16 years has been the absence of Palestinian elections. And the reason for that is that Europe, the United States, did not support Palestinian elections because of the fear that of the outcomes of these elections. So I hope that the support to the Palestinians will also include support to Palestinian building and Palestinian elections. And this will also strengthen the civil society within the Palestinians, because if we continue to have leaderships that match some political interests, it will not serve anyone. So I think European support for Palestinian democracy, for Palestinian rule of law, for building, for assisting the Palestinians in that respect. Also, on even Europe is very close to the Middle East, and Europe has interests, and the Middle East has interests. And these interests can be fulfilled when we look at cooperation that exists between the two, mainly in the field of energy, in the field of environment, in the field of the rule of law. Like, there are many sectors that the Europeans can play a political and economic and moral role.
But what would be the paradigm? I mean, for many years, the Europeans believed there is a symmetrical problem. There is Israelis and Palestinians, so they should be brought together and they should agree on something. And we were talking about Palestinian elections, we were talking about the lack of leadership and so on. Now we have a situation which is not symmetrical, where you have one side which has no plan and no power to implement a plan, and you have another side with the current Israeli government who has a precise plan to implement its project, which is, as far as if I read correctly the statements also of government surrogates and representatives, which is annexation, which is an unlimited and total claim to the Holy Land from the river to the sea. So isn't, like, romantically speaking, like 20, 30 years ago, Europeans were like, let's organize dialogue, what we are doing now. But this is no longer about dialogue, am I correct? How do you want the Europeans to approach this new reality in the Middle East?
The conflict has never been symmetrical. There's always, like, Israel and the Palestinians under occupation, or the Palestinian Authority bound by agreements that restrict their authorities on several levels. So the conflict has never been symmetrical, even though today more than ever. The European role is basically to play as an honest broker between the two, especially with the asymmetry. And the European Union has been one of the major supporters of the Palestinian Authority over the past decade or so, or more, whether it's financially, economically, or politically. Like, they have been a major supporter to the Palestinians. But what I'm saying is that the vision for the support needs to be combined with a political issue. For example, there are many issues that the European Union or the European states say they believe in, but we don't see tangible measures. For example, recognition of statehood, of Palestinian statehood. Some European countries have recognized a Palestinian state, some European countries not. And it's not really a convincing argument on why not.
So you would advocate for an immediate recognition of Palestine as a state by all members of the European Union, including Italy?
Yes, because if you want to stop annexation, and if you want to stop the destruction, and if you want to stop a plan of displacement, the first thing that you would do is to recognize one of the parties, just like you recognize Israel as state, recognize the Palestinians as state.
Do you agree with that, Liel, that would be a step forward, an actionable step for the Europeans? Briefly, I want to invite everyone.
I think that if the framework is a two-state solution, I think it can be a good action to recognize a Palestinian state. Actually, a Palestinian state that was declared in the late 80s. It was voted and recognized by many members of the UN, and it's actually just blocked by the UN Council for a long time.
But you think it would change the political reality, and it would be a step towards...
With what's happening inside Israel, it can maybe push them more to the corner, yeah, and create even more this idea of Metzada, it's only us, yeah. But with the current government, I'm not sure that's a problem. I think now, because the opposition is rising, to put more international pressure on the current government, while emphasizing how it's about the policies and not about the existence of the state, can increase the opposition and strengthen the opposition at the moment. I think for many Israelis, and I tell you also about myself, October 7th hit very hard. I lost friends in October 7th. I had friends that had been in Nova and were killed. And also lost some friends because of their opinion, because they legitimized what happened or wanted to explain. And although I was working with Palestinians for many years, there were some things that were said that hit me very hard. And luckily, some Palestinians were friends enough to call me and recognize my pain, and telling me that it's not the way forward, and telling me that yes, indeed, Gaza was under siege, but this level of brutality is not something that they support. And these were partners that I was willing to continue to work with. And these connections that are happening in these specific spaces of the civil society are crucial for allowing Israelis to actually feel safe, that they can compromise and they can give away power, because it won't be completely automatically be imposed on them. So I think emphasizing conversation of Palestinian rights, Palestinian dignity, the ending the oppression, ending the occupation, ending this vicious war is crucial. However, denying completely the existence of the state and its importance, denying completely the right for Jews also to feel safe, will be destructive if you want to persuade Israelis to support a resolution.
Thank you very much, Rumana. Thank you, Liel. Coming from Germany, I can only tell you, maybe I have a bit of a romantic vision of Italy, but from our side, some leadership is required from this country, and we think that Italy has the potential and the history that it has proven it can be extremely instrumental in guiding the Europeans towards a more just, more balanced, and prosperous neighborhood policy. Thank you very much, and with these words, I hand over to Maria, and I thank you all for your attention and for valuable contributions.
No, thank you again for coming, and if you found that this type of discussion and space are more needed, please do write. Some of you have my address or my colleague's address. For us, it's very important to have your feedback on this, because it helps us also understanding what is needed in the Italian public space. And again, thank you for coming for such a great number. We didn't actually expect. So for us, it means a lot as an institute to have you all present. Thank you again.
Grazie mille,